Hello everyone, today I wanted to read a passage from Merlin, Master of Magic by Gordon Strong. This book is like wackadoo crazy, and I will go on record as saying it in front of the world. This book is whack. Whack. I first got this book a long time ago. As with most of the books I got, it was probably around 2010, 2009. That's just when I started buying lots of magical books, a lot, because I'd started working at a bookstore. So I just had a huge influx of money, and I worked at a place where the books were right there. So, so much of my collection comes from that time period, and this is one of those. I remember giving the book away just a few years ago, but I recently rebought it, as I do every single book I give away. But yes, disclaimer up front, this book is not historically accurate. It is not about the history of Merlin, like the actual folklore mythology of King Arthur and Merlin. It is not. It is not. You will find some of that in this book, certainly, being referenced, but overall, this book is one man's account of who he thinks Merlin is as an entity, as an otherworldly spirit. And so he infuses a lot of personal ideas into this book, and they're very obvious. So I don't think you'll be confused by what is his own ideas and what is not. For example, he believes in Atlantis as a place that did exist on Earth and no longer exists. And he believed that Merlin was a spirit, or maybe even a real human, who lived there and survived the fall of Atlantis. He believes that Merlin lived in Egypt, ancient Egypt. He equates Merlin with, it's almost like Odin, right? This traveler who went everywhere and learned the magic of all these people. That's very much how this guy views Merlin, which can rub people the wrong way. He also equates gods a lot, which is very Greco-Roman. He'll be like, oh, this is a god of magic. Well, it's like he believes in archetypes more so than individual gods. So sometimes in the book he will say that Merlin is Odin and Odin is Zeus, that they're all the same entity. You just have to get used to it. It's certainly jarring at first. But I wanted to read to you, The Lady of the Lake chapter, at least some of it. If you've been with me for a while, you know that I work with The Lady of the Lake. I have since like day one of, me doing my dedication on this path. And I call her Vivian. However, in this book, he calls her Nemu, which is actually more in line with the folktale anyway. I call her Vivian, which really comes from like the Mists of Avalon, which is a fictional book, right? Anywho, it doesn't matter. He also talks about Morgan Le Fay in this, and you will see that he equates Morgan Le Fay with like Hecate at one point, which is weird. He equates her as being a Valkyrie, which is crazy. But as I told you, you have to step back and see, like, first of all, this is one man's accounts. Okay? These are his opinions, not mine. These are his opinions. Not necessarily gospel, right, or truth. So, let's read through. Lady of the Lake, Dark Goddess. It is Morgan Le Fay who will lead Arthur into the other world as he is dying, and Nemu who will send Merlin into the void. Now that you know, that comes from the folk tales, right, of King Arthur. So, some say that these two enchantresses are one and the same, although it seems apparent that Morgan has the darker aspect. She provides an insight into how the feminine psyche is presented in the Arthurian tales. To Merlin, water is the goddess of the lake, and the wind purifying thought. Morgan is the queen of fairies, and also death. The gender of death is a moot point, though in his fantasy novels Terry Pratchett portrays death very convincingly as male. But in the Arthurian tales, Morgan is a Norse Valkyrie, See how he's equating things. He's using them as an archetype. One who takes the souls of dead warriors to Valhalla. I mean, she does do that in the story, right? At the end, when Arthur is wounded and dying, she shows up and rows him to Avalon. So, it is she who will take Arthur to Avalon in her bark, the Coracle of Caradwyn. That is complicated wording, but okay. This is where it gets crazy, so just bear with me. I'm going to start the sentence over because it's about to go off the rails. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to start it over. It is she who will take Arthur to Avalon in her bark, the Coracle of Caradwyn. For being of the Isis cult, she ferries the dead to the underworld herself. Morgan Le Fay may indeed be Persephone, the queen of Hades, and of the highest rank among the deities. She is certainly Hecate, the Chthonian goddess of magic, and certainly capable of casting spells in pursuit of revenge. You see what I'm saying here? Wild, right? It's wild. Schooled in magic, Morgan certainly was. Her first master is a shadowy figure, so dark as to be all intense and visible. We know almost nothing about him except that, like Merlin with Arthur, he was one who was anxious to oversee the birth of certain individuals. In this instance, it was Morgan Le Fay. In her youth, she was summoned to the power center of the Inner Temple with the sacred kingdom of Avalon. It was in that secret place that she learned her magic. She lived in a timeless state where she had no awareness of anything other than the great forces to which she slowly but surely became attuned. There is much of Nephthys, the dark sister of Isis, about Morgan. Perhaps there is more of the Queen of Heaven in Nemu than in Morgan. Certainly Morgan is not above using her powers for her own ends, a proceeding generally not considered wise in the world of magic. Whatever. Her will is almost invincible, and she displays many of the traits that we associate with the astrological sign of Scorpio. Okay. In the modern system, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, which in mythology was the ruler of Hades, the underworld. See, he mixes everything. Greek, Roman, Egyptian, wild. Let's see. Pluto in mythology was the ruler of Hades, the underworld. Secrets, treasures, and the deepest of emotions are hidden there. Pluto also represents the catharsis in life, the purging of unwanted and therefore debilitating ideas and feelings. Revenge, too, is part of the Scorpio-Pluto world, and Morgan is known as the Apple Woman, who distributes poisoned apples okay, in an apparently wanton act of vengeance against humanity. Cue the Snow White reference, right? The character of the Wicked Queen, who features in many fairy tales, is her legacy to children's literature and folk tales. See, I would disagree. I would say that is not Morgan Le Fay. That's a totally different goddess, but that would be a whole nother conversation. Morgan also presides over the three springs of life: life, desire, and death. As her teacher, Merlin also taught Morgan Le Fay much magic. During their time together, the wizard came under the enchantment of Morgan and yearned for her. It is said that Merlin's nature was half human and half animal. The human half was female, and the other was the priapic god Pan, who is incapable of love and only feels lust. In Morgan Le Fay, it is the reverse. She's the wanton female who preys upon those men who are weak or foolish enough to be enticed by her. She is La Belle Dame sans merci, of Keats' celebrated and evocative poem. See, he's just broad strokes. Broad strokes. He believes in these energies as archetypes, not as individual gods and spirits. You get my drift? It is her overwhelming charms that cause Arthur to couple with Morgan Le Fay one fateful Beltane. The night, bewitchment, youth, and perhaps wine are the volatile elements in this affair. Perhaps wine. It has also never been made clear whether the protagonists of this passionate encounter knew at the time the identity of the other party. That's something we see in the Mists of Avalon played out, where Morgan did know, I think, right? But Arthur, no, neither of them knew because they were wearing masks. That's right. Okay. Whatever the circumstances, and whether motivated by jealousy or revenge in the years following, Morgan seems intent on thwarting the king's plans at every turn. She even goes so far as an attempt to steal Excalibur. After bewitching the guards of Camelot one night, Morgan succeeds at entering the king's bedchamber, discovering that Arthur sleeps with the mighty sword firmly in his grasp, and if he were to wake, she would be instantly slain. She contents herself with stealing the scabbard. Of this, Merlin once asked of Arthur, "Like ye better the sword or the scabbard?" "I like better the sword," said Arthur. "Ye are the most unwise, for the scabbard is worth 10 of the sword. For while ye keep the scabbard upon ye, you shall lose no blood, but ye ever so sore wounded." See, so what they're saying here is, it didn't matter that she couldn't steal the sword, because she stole the scabbard. And the scabbard, which is, the thing you put the sword in, as long as she had that, he could be wounded now. He could be killed. He could bleed. Whereas before he could not, because of the enchantment of the scabbard. On discovering the theft, Arthur sets off in pursuit, and Morgan Le Fay, knowing he will overtake her, rides to a lake on the plain. Once there, she throws the scabbard far out into the water. Its heavily bejeweled patterning ensures that it will sink. She then turns herself and her followers into stone, so that they will be invisible. The loss of the scabbard immediately makes Arthur vulnerable to any hurt and signifies his ultimate downfall. Another version of the tale has Morgan Le Fay succeeding in appropriating both the sword and the scabbard, which she presents to Accolon, her lover. Arthur is then forced to fight a duel against Accolon. Without Excalibur at his disposal, he is powerless against his foe. It is Nimue, the Lady of the Lake, who saves him by causing Accolon to drop Excalibur at the moment when he's about to deliver a death blow to the king. Whew! We will stop there, and we'll read on with Nimue, the Lady of the Lake, in a separate video. But anywho, you get the gist here of, he recounts the myths of Morgan Le Fay fairly well, but he injects so much, he injects so much personal ideas, personal beliefs into everything, and he equates archetypes of entities together with each other in a way that might be seen as cultural appropriation, it might be seen as blasphemous, it might be seen as colonizing behavior. But this book is fascinating. I know that sounded really wordy and deep, but that's how we are on this channel. So, I will review the next part, which is about the Lady of the Lake, Nimue, in a separate video. That was his talk of such about Morgan Le Fay. Agrees and disagrees all through that. As you probably know, I have worked with Morgan Le Fay along with the Lady of the Lake since forever. You can go back and look at my channel. There are videos here from 2015 where I talk about working with them. And I read you passages of me working with them that were written back in 2008. So I've been working with them for a while. I feel like I have a good understanding of who they are to me, how they present themselves to me. And it's definitely not this. But I think that reading things that are wildly different from our own experiences and opinions of a deity or spirit is what helps us enhance our views of said spirit, if that makes any sense. I think it's good to challenge ourselves and to realize that the way you see a God is not necessarily the way everyone sees that God. And just because someone may work with Morgan Le Fay and she looks totally different, sounds different, treats them differently, doesn't what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't take away from your experience with her. Their experience with her is not more valid than yours, just because it's wildly different. There's no right or wrong way to work or experience a deity or a spirit. So, wild and crazy, wordy. There's a lot in this little book. But anywho, to be continued. Thank you so much. Goodbye.